Welcome. Can you hear me? No? What about now? Welcome, everyone. We are so pleased to see a packed house. This is lovely. On behalf of Hebron Lutheran Church, my name is Gabriella Newman. I've been working behind the scenes to plan this event, and we're all so excited to have you here. A couple of things. The restrooms are in the parish hall across the way. We will have a 15-minute intermission, so that's something to keep in mind. In a moment, I will ask, we're going to have a speaker just talk briefly about the history of the church and the organ, followed by Pastor James Nicely, who will introduce the musicians, and then we will begin the concert. So Doug Harnsberger, he's a registered architect who specializes in historic architecture. He's worked on the U.S. Capitol building and actually wrote his master's thesis on the history and architecture of this church. So we are inviting Doug to just speak briefly to us so that we can learn more about the historic significance of this sanctuary and the organ that we're about to hear. And he's come all the way from Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, where he lives. So thank you, Doug, for coming here and speaking with us.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Let's see if I can place this strategically so you can all hear me, but I'll project, I promise. My assignment in 5 minutes is to try to impress upon you why this is the most special building in the Piedmont of Virginia of the 18th century. I'm an architectural historian, but I'm also an architect, so I try to combine those interests to work on historic buildings in Virginia and in Pennsylvania and Washington. But this was my first project in graduate school, and I chose it for a reason. I'm a descendant of the 1717 colony, and I like to imagine that my ancestor was part of this building campaign when this church was put up in 1740. At least we have no proof of that, but it's something that I like to go with. Today's assignment is to put the organ concert in the context of the evolution of this building. So I'm going to start with two props. They're a little dangerous, I admit, something out of a horror movie. The gooseneck broadaxe is a German broadaxe of the 18th century. This is authentic. It's not an imitation. It's the real thing. And the adze, which shapes the timbers, is this tool here. And the piece I want to impress you with is that this section of the church, east to west, this what is now the transept, was built with these two tools and some chisels and planes, hand tools that were brought over by our ancestors. This is a hand-built church, and the remarkable part of that story is that above us, above this Odinino ceiling, is a system of construction that dates from the medieval period of Germany. So they brought those traditions of building and a few tools with them, and they constructed this entire original sanctuary with hand tools. There were no mills. You couldn't go to Lowe's or Home Depot and find the lumber you needed. You didn't even have a measuring tape. The German equivalent of a foot had 20 different versions of the foot in Germany in that period. They weren't that organized, so everybody had chains to measure by. Anyway, I have 5 minutes, so I want to get back to the major point. This original construction here is the oldest surviving Liegenderstuhl construction in Virginia. Liegenderstuhl means lying chair, and it's a method of giving a vault or a clear space to the higher story above the ceiling. And that was part of my assignment when I first came here, is to climb up into the attic and find this remarkable construction, this medieval construction that really began in the 14th century. It came to this part of the Piedmont because of our ancestors. And remarkably, it survives. There there's just a handful of timber frame structures from the 18th century in Virginia. They tend to get hit by termites or fall apart, or for whatever reason the wood frame construction doesn't survive. This one did. And the remarkable story of all the hand tooling and the marks of the craftsmen are all up there. It's a story that has its own iconography. Anyway, that's part of my pitch about the enthusiasm of the original construction. So this was all done in 1739-40. In 1801, 1802, the nave was constructed. The congregation was growing. They needed more pews. That's good. They also wanted to bring this very special instrument, the Tannenberg organ from Pennsylvania. David Tannenberg built organs for the Lutherans and the other Protestant congregations in Pennsylvania. So there's a very special instrument up here that you're going to hear. And I'd like to take this moment to introduce George Taylor. Where's George? Where did he go? Would you stand up, George? I'd like him to be introduced. The reason George is so important to this story is that he recognized he's an organ restorer and builder, and I've been to his shop in Stanton yesterday. It is the most incredible shop. They make everything for the organ, for the pipe organs. And his company makes the sheet lead, they make I won't go into all of it, but it's all remarkable and authentic. George came to this church and recognized that there's an original instrument from 1801 that has never been modified. And it's the oldest continuously played Tannenberg organ. So it's not just about the architecture, it's about the sound, and it's also about the light. And I just want to point out that when this vault was built here in the nave, it came to meet another vault here, the Liegender Stuhl vault in this direction. And it went up as high as the chamber of the organ loft behind you. So you can imagine how high the room was before the Codenino fresco was installed after the Civil War. There were windows, and there still are windows if you look on the outside, on the second level here that flooded light in from the east and the west. So the effect of the Codenino fresco, however well intended to keep the heat in and to do the decorative ceiling treatment, it also compromised the voice of the organ, and it compromised the light in the room. So those are the two things that are in tension here. It is part of the story that the Codenino frescoes were installed, but the main event of this building is about the Liegender Stuhl handmade construction. No mills, just all done by hand, starting with the tree trunk, and the insertion of the beautiful instrument in the organ loft. So I think that's my 5 minutes. I don't want to get too involved, but I wanted to give you that context because this is a most remarkable place. And the fact that it survives from 1740 is even more remarkable. I'd love to see this story gain national prominence because I don't think there's another place like it in the nation. So it's an extraordinary place with a great story to tell. And I invite you to talk to George at intermission or afterwards because his knowledge of that instrument is far beyond what I can discuss. So I'll leave it there.
Hold steady, Doug. Doug could not make our rededication ceremony that we held a couple weeks ago, and if you would have seen a year ago, the center beam here is what had collapsed. But Doug, being part of the congregation, as we talked about and heard, was contacted right away, and basically we couldn't have done what we did without one of his support and services. Doug lined us up. We call them Walter's craftsmen. They're our contractors. They're definitely craftsmen. You'll see pictures next door when you go over of what it looked like, and you can't tell anything was different. But the recognition of Doug's service, and I should say he did everything pro bono. I could call him anytime, anywhere from China, and he always responded to the call. But the congregation took a picture. We're going to present that to him right now, and signed it. And the wood is part of the scrap wood that was left over. Doug, quite honestly, thank you.
Oh, yes, you will. Sorry, I get carried away.
You do sermons too? This is what I use every Sunday.
My grandfather did, but I don't know if you want me to try. I think I can, I'll limit it to architecture. There we go.
I think that works. Thank you for being here. I'm Jim Nisley, and I'm pastor, and you were hearing the long history of this congregation. I'm the 35th pastor of this congregation. So that goes way back. Now, I have the honor of introducing our musicians today. And so they're up in the different lofts, right? So Daniel Grotz and Heather Hightower. Is that your last name? Hightower. Oh, good. Now, I appreciate Daniel and how much he is giving to us. I'm going to start with Daniel because he's studying hard to get his doctorate in organ performance, and he's had to make several trips here from Ohio, but we are thankful that you're doing that. I first got to know this family through your parents. I know that you grew up at Mitchell's Presbyterian, and we share the murals with Mitchell's, where your dad was pastor. And now my wife Carol and I enjoy being affiliate members, that's the official name, at Kirko Cliff Presbyterian, where your dad is the pastor. So that's the official tie-in today. Everything Daniel is doing today for us is a donation. Because when he heard that we were having to undergo these renovations and restoration and all that, he said, I'll do that and not charge a penny. And then he recruited his friend, Heather. And all of us on the committee have listened to you sing, and your voice is beautiful. Daniel, we've listened to your concerts. You're outstanding. So we know this is going to be good. Now, one note about Daniel. He is giving his all. He has the flu, so he's wearing a mask. But what that means is he will gladly smile at you, but he will not shake your hand. He will not hug you, unless it's mom, right? Okay. But you're wearing a mask too. Okay, and so's Dad. Okay. I invite us to a time of prayer, and then we're going to commence with our concert. Let's pray. Gracious Lord, we thank you for the gift of music, and we thank you for music that glorifies you, and we want that to happen this day. May our spirits be lifted. Please be with Daniel. Give him renewed vigor and health to wonderfully render this concert. Please be with Heather as she lifts her voice in speech and song. And we ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. So I present to you now Daniel and Heather.
this working? Hello? Yes? Okay. So you just heard two movements from Clarenbeau's Suite on the Second Tone. And for more information about that piece or about the structure of today's concert, please look at the insert in your bulletin and read it at your leisure. For now, I'm going to talk about the next two pieces. These are two contrasting pieces from Frescobaldi's Mass for the Madonna. The first is a Baroque-style toccata. It's very brief, full of drama and mood swings. And the next is a Renaissance-style ricercar, with 4 voice parts to be played by the organist, and a 5th part to be actually sung. But the 5th part is quite strange. Frescobaldi placed 6 notes at the top of the page and wrote underneath them, "Understand me if you can." It was a puzzle, and what he wanted the performers to do was to figure out all the places where you could fit those 6 notes into the rest of the piece. So I'm going to play the ricercar, and every so often, Heather is going to jump in and sing her 6 notes. They fit 8 times, so if you want, you can try to count all of Heather's entrances and see if you get 8. It's really a unique piece. There's nothing else like it in the organ repertoire, and I hope you love it as much as I do. So here are 2 movements from Frescobaldi's Mass for the Madonna, the toccata, and the ricercar. So the publication that became the most important publication of organ music after Frescobaldi's Fiori Musicali was by Bach, and the publication was called Keyboard Practice 3, which is a really plain name for what would become the greatest publication of organ music. It consisted of a couple secular works and 11 pairs of chorale preludes. And each of those pairs consists of a setting of the hymn for an organ with pedals and a setting of the hymn for the organ without pedals. And I don't think the ones for the organ without pedals get played quite so much nowadays. Perhaps the main exception is the one on the Ten Commandments, which is what I'm going to open part 2 with. But the 3 that you'll hear in part 1 by Bach, I've actually never heard anyone else besides myself perform them live. And maybe another reason for that is they're rather difficult and complex, and it's very hard to pick out the tune in them. By contrast, the 3 by Walter, Bach's cousin, they're much simpler, they're not too difficult to play, and it's very easy to hear the melody in them. When I was picking what stops to use, I noticed that the 8-foot flute on this organ is very dark and hollow, and that's because Tannenberg intended the 8-foot flute to increase the gravity of the full organ sound. He probably didn't think of much as it being used by itself, but I think that dark hollow character works really well for the tune that you'll recognize as O Sacred Head, Now Wounded. That's the second one by Walter. And you'll also hear the 4-foot flute. The 4-foot flute on this organ is a very different character from the 8-foot flute. It's very delicate. It reminds me kind of like a penny whistle. I love it, and I'm going to use it many times by itself on this program. And the first time you'll hear it in Liebster Jesu, or Dearest Jesus, which is the first of the 3 Walter chorale preludes. So Heather and I are going to do these in alternation. She's going to sing them a cappella, and then I'm going to play them. So we're going to do 6 chorale preludes. Please withhold your applause until the end of both sets. And if you lose count after 6, the last one is the loudest. Thank you.
Auf die süße
Okay, we come to the final three pieces in the first half. The first is the Jig Fugue by Buxtehude, which I just absolutely had to include it on this program because it's one of the most popular pieces for organ without pedals. It's really a showpiece, but it's also quite well crafted. The second is a dialogue between flutes meant to imitate the shepherds at the birth of Christ. You may have noticed in the first piece on the program that Philip, my assistant, stuck a pencil into the organ to hold down a note. That was to create the effect of a drone or a pedal point, and I'll be using that technique in the shepherd piece as well. And then the final piece in the first half is a setting of a French Christmas carol, or Noël, by Claude Balbastre. And that is the only piece on today's program that has no pedal part because the composer also intended it to be played on the piano. Balbastre, you'll hear, has a style somewhat similar to the style of Mozart, and both these two composers lived at a time when the piano was really coming into its own, and a lot of the great composers were turning to write music for the piano instead. The Balbastre piece is in the form of theme and variations. And this is a good chance for me to thank and acknowledge my assistant, Philip, who's pulling stops and turning pages. Because since it's a theme and variations, we want to make the variations varied. And so he's going to be changing the registration. That means the stops after every variation. So give him your thoughts and your prayers. Thank you. And please withhold your applause until the end of part one.
folks, this past Wednesday we had the organ tune, and Aaron Reichert of Taylor and Rudy, organ builders, made sure to say this to me. You have a national treasure in this Tannenberg organ. Did you train him to say that? Yeah, I thought you did. So thank you for keeping this historic organ in place for all of us to visit and enjoy. Hey, what we're doing today is a fundraiser for preserving and restoring on a continuing basis this building and that organ. And so we appreciate your presence today. And I want to tell you that Hebron congregation can't do this work alone. We will always need you out in the community. And so this day, I'd ask you to be thinking about a financial gift. And in the pew racks in front of you are some cards. I think they're in there, right? If they are, would you take one out and kind of hold it up so that I know that you have one? You can decide on your own if you want to give or not. See, for us at Hebron, the most important thing is that you are here. You are simply affirming that we got something kind of neat going on here. And if you want to give a gift, that would be great. You can fill that out and maybe a check or cash or whatever. As you leave today, there are baskets. But if you want to go home and think about it, just take the card home, think about it. But here's what I would like to encourage you to do. Fill that card out with your contact information. Because we want to do more things at Hebron like this. And we want to be able to contact you. So the way that we can do that is if we have your contact information. Whatever you give, thank you very much. And I say that on behalf of our Hebron Lutheran congregation. So folks, now we enjoy part 2 of this fine Hebron organ concert with Daniel and Heather.
So now we come to the second set of 6 chorale preludes. The first 3 are by Ernst Pepin, a 20th century Lutheran composer. He lived in Germany during the dark times, and he even managed to make it onto Hitler's list of degenerate composers. You'll see his style is a bit quirky. But the heart of today's program are the 3 chorale preludes by Brahms. When he knew he was dying, Brahms wrote 11 chorale preludes for the organ. They were his final compositions. 10 of them are based on hymns about death or the afterlife, and one of them, Lo Hauerose Erbluming, is a Christmas hymn. And these pieces are extremely special to me. I played them at both of my grandmother's funerals, which is actually the first place where I collaborated with Heather Hightower. The first 2 on the set are really tender, lovely pieces. When I first played them on this organ, I nearly cried because the sound of this organ, I think, is just so perfect for the first 2 Brahms chorales. And then the third one is full of longing and strife. The translation of the title is usually, How blessed are you, you faithful ones. But in the German, there's an extra word there, and the word is doch. And the word doch means to the contrary, or on the other hand, to remind you that this is not really a song about the blessed ones in heaven. It's actually being spoken by those on earth who are looking up and still longing for their freedom. It's really channeling the spirit of Psalm 84, which Brahms put at the center of his Requiem. And you might even consider opening the Bibles in front of you, if you have them in the pews, to look at Psalm 84 when you listen to the last Brahms chorale prelude. So Heather and I will now do the next 6 chorale preludes. Please withhold your applause until the end of the set. Thank you.
Vor dir wie noch nicht blau.
Okay, we've come to the last three pieces on the program. The first two are just cute little curiosities by two modern American composers. One of them, Emmylou Deemer, actually just died, so I'm really grateful to have an opportunity to share her music. And then we're concluding the program with A Mighty Fortress is Our God, kind of the Lutheran anthem. If you were to Google greatest Lutheran organist, the first name that would come up would, of course, be Johann Sebastian Bach. And the second name that would come up would not be a German. It would be an American, Paul Manz from Minnesota. Paul Manz was particularly famous for his hymn festivals. They would choose hymns, Paul Manz would improvise on the hymn, and then everybody would sing it together. And so we're going to end with a hymn in the form that Paul Manz set. I'm going to improvise for about 2 minutes on A Mighty Fortress is Our God, and then we're all going to sing it together. Heather will be downstairs, and she's going to motion for you all to stand when my improvisation is going to the final cadence. There will be about 2 beats of rest after the improvisation is done, and that's where we all come in. And if you're not sure when to start singing, just watch Heather. She knows when to start singing. You'll use the hymnal. It's number 505 in the hymnal, and you may want to have it ready. Be careful. Do not get distracted by 504, which is also A Mighty Fortress, because that's a different translation. So just stick with 505. But again, there are 2 American pieces first, and then we'll end with A Mighty Fortress. And just for fair warning, there will be an interlude before the final verse of A Mighty Fortress. So thank you so much for coming today. This is, as you can see, an incredible crowd, an incredible turnout. It's been really great to play this wonderful historic organ for you. And thank you so much to Hebron Lutheran Church. Thank you.